Buzz, what are you doing? We don't have time to mess around. You're late enough as it is. We're supposed to be jamming on our final presentation for culinary class, remember?
That's exactly what we're doing. No one ever said our final presentation couldn't be a video. Now smile real big, Amber. I'm gonna make you a star.
Great idea!
Now all we have to do is pick a subject. What was the assignment again?
One food, any food, find out where it comes from, how it's made, and then use it in a couple recipes.
Okay. First of all, we'll pick something that we like. Something tasty and fun and interesting, otherwise we won't be into it. We'll pick something that will keep us super busy, and it'll make us golden students. Honey! Let's go!
Liquid Gold! We found a great website all about bees and honey. And it's got tons of recipes too. Just print out everything you need.
The hunt begins. Surprise, surprise, we didn't need to look far. All sorts of restaurants are covered in honey.
Yes, there is the honey. It's over there.
Let's go!
Oatmeal and fixins? Sounds warm and cozy.
Honey barbecue wings and a honey barbecue sandwich too.
Honey biscuits? That's a classic.
Chicken BLT salad with honey mustard dressing. Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah, we have honey mustard sauce for the sandwiches, for the nuggets, and also for the salads.
Well, that was a lot of stuff with honey on it.
That's a honey mustard.
We got busy all right. At the library, online, requesting more info. Amber and I dug up lots fast. Now that we're well prepared, we should be able to bebop through the rest of this project.
Now all we have to do is find ourselves a chef.
Chef Monty, let's go!
Let's go!
Hi, Chef Monty, remember us?
Yeah, Amber and Buzz, right?
Right.
What are you guys up to?
We're making a video called The Honey Project. Want to be in it?
Well, do I have a choice? You won't believe it, but I happen to be working on some honey projects of my own today.
That doesn't look like honey. What's up with the dark color? Tell me it isn't really honey.
Oh yeah, it's honey all right. It's buckwheat honey. Here, have a taste. There you go.
All right. Toasty. What is buckwheat honey anyway? It's not like any honey I've ever tried before. What'd you do to it?
Oh, nothing, man. Nature did it all. The flavor and the color of the honey depends on the flower where the bees buzz. These are called varietals. There's over 300 honey varietals in the United States and over 3,000 worldwide. Honey comes from flowers on plants, trees, wildflowers, even weeds. Do you know why a beekeeper puts their hives in the middle of a field? The bees help in the pollination process, and they also allow the beekeeper to obtain a single source of honey. Now, things like clover and alfalfa, they grow all over the country. But some of these other varietals grow in limited amounts in various regions throughout the country. Do you know that all different varietal honeys taste different?
Whoa.
I'd like you to try the orange blossom here, and then the eucalyptus. I'm going to tell you about some other varietals that you can find in limited areas that are well worth seeking out. We've got Tupelo honey from Florida and Georgia. We've got sourwood honey in the mid-Atlantic. And over here, fireweed from the Pacific Northwest. That comes from a wildflower. And of course, blueberry honey comes from blueberry bushes. Now the orange blossom that you just tasted, it's got a nice fruity citrus aroma. I like to use that in fruit desserts, cobblers, pies, and you could also melt that in tea, hot tea or iced tea, or maybe use it in a salad dressing. The eucalyptus honey from this plant here, that goes great on sauces for chicken and fish. Buckwheat honey is really good for barbecue sauces and meat marinades, really dark sauces and things like that. But it's also good for baking, like in a nice rich ginger snap cookie. Amber, you look so serious when you're tasting honey. Tell us what you're thinking.
The darker honeys seem to have the most complex flavors.
And some even taste like the plants they come from, or like how they smell.
Hey, wait a minute. Have you two been holding out on me? What's going on here?
You won't believe it, Chef. Since we started researching this project, we learned tons about how they make honey.
I think the worker bees have the best gig. They get to cruise around all day in nature looking for flowers full of nectar. Sometimes they travel as far as 5 miles. When one zeroes in on the right spot, she immediately gets busy. She stores nectar in a special part of her body known as the honey sac. As the bee works, pollen collects on her legs. She transfers it from flower to flower. Without this pollination process, flowers wouldn't be able to reproduce, form fruit, or grow into vegetables.
Bees are unique insects because they live and work together in a community known as the colony. You think high school is a complex society? Anywhere from 20,000 to 60,000 honeybees populate one colony. Almost all are worker bees. They do the big jobs to keep the hive humming. They're also the only bees with stingers. But honeybees aren't aggressive. They only sting when they're threatened. Some worker bees build the wax honeycomb, some make the honey, and some take care of newborn bees and larvae. Like Buzz said, still others collect nectar and bring it back to the hive. Bees need to make honey to feed the hive during winter months when trees and plants don't flower. More worker bees remove the nectar by handing it off to each other. As the bees handle the nectar, they add enzymes and moisture evaporates. That's what turns the concentrated nectar into honey. When the honey is ready, the bees seal it into a wax cell within the honeycomb. Another cool worker bee job is fanning. The bees do nothing but flap their little wings really fast to help keep the hive from getting too hot, and also to help evaporate moisture from the nectar.
The buffest worker bees guard the hive to keep intruders from hurting the queen. Yeah, she's real important. Each colony only has one queen bee. She's the biggest, lives the longest, and is the only bee in the hive that can lay eggs. Drones are the male bees in the hive. Their only job is to mate with the queen. How do the bees know what to do and where to fly to find the nectar?
They dance.
Say what?
They're moves and turns and spins that communicate directions and other instructions. The bees actually look like they're dancing, don't they?
Beekeepers move hives around and place them close to flowers that are ready for pollination and full of nectar. Using smoke to calm the bees and help keep them from swarming, the beekeeper is able to get into the hive to check on the honey and see if it's ripe for harvest. Each hive produces about 80 pounds more honey than the bees need, so we get to chow down on the extras.
Ripe honey collects in the comb on frames in the beehive. The comb is separated from the frames by hand or by machine. Through a process called extraction, whole frames are put into a spinner that uses centrifugal force to pull the honey out of the comb. Then it is filtered to remove any organic solids from the hive. Without using any additives or preservatives, honey is simply poured into jars, sealed, and prepared for distribution.
Honey comes 3 basic ways. The most common is liquid honey, sold in jars, bottles, and my buddy, the honey bear. Whipped honey is pure honey that has been processed to make it crystallize on purpose, so it's thick, opaque, and spreadable. Then there's good old-fashioned comb honey. Go ahead and eat the wax and everything. Honey came to America after a long history in the Old World. Check out this ancient beekeeper found in a Spanish cave. The Egyptians figured out how to handle bees and extract honey for mass consumption. Over time, people have used honey as a sweetener, as a preserver, and to cure illness and injury.
Honey is still an important part of our everyday lives. Think of all the supermarket foods we eat. Honey is composed of several kinds of sugars, as well as traces of many vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and antioxidants. That's why we see honey in a whole bunch of products that we use every day, but don't necessarily eat. I could eat that much honey in a day if I knew more stuff than just putting it on an apple.
Well, tell me, Amber, what do you think of when you think of food and honey?
Sweet stuff like muffins and biscuits and scones.
Great, let's start there because I've got a big sweet tooth. I like to bake sweet and sometimes even savory, and I'm going to use those ingredients together in this recipe. I've got cream cheese and rosemary to flavor this scone, but then I'm going to use honey to really pull those tastes forward, okay? Now, the good thing about this scone, you can serve it for breakfast, slather some extra cream cheese and your favorite honey on top. You could also serve it with the main meal of the day or at dinner, like a biscuit, just with butter on top, and it'll work really well. Now, let me tell you a couple things about cooking with honey. You definitely want to keep in mind that honey is a humectant. Now, what that means is that honey will not only attract moisture, it'll retain it. So your baked goods won't dry out quite as quickly, which is good news. Another thing is, it's a little bit sweeter than sugar, so you do not need quite as much honey as you would need sugar.
Chef Monty, sometimes my honey bear, it dries out and it gets all solid and sort of white at the bottom. Can I still use it?
Sure, I think I know what you mean. Let me show you some honey over here that's crystallized. Does it look like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Now honey will crystallize on its own if it sits too long or if it gets cold. All you want to do is bring some water to a simmer, like I've got over here. Don't let it boil. Bring it to a simmer, and if you put the honey in the water, over a little while it will re-liquefy, or you could microwave it if you watch it real closely. Did you know you can substitute honey for sugar in most recipes?
Really?
Now, remember, like I told you before, because honey is sweeter than sugar, you use less. It's got a higher fructose content. So what that means is you'll get the desired sweetness with less honey than sugar in the recipe. Another tip, when you're measuring honey, take the measuring cup. You can either brush it with a little vegetable oil or use some nonstick cooking spray. That way, when you pour the honey into it, it'll come right out and it'll be so easy for cleanup.
Cool.
Okay, so my dough's at a nice consistency here. You can see I've kneaded it in the bowl with this nice little tool, and it's not sticking at all. So I'm going to go ahead and pop it out on the baking sheet. Now what we can do is flatten it out to a little disc, about 3/4 of an inch high and maybe about 9 inches around. And let's see, what I'm going to do now is go ahead and brush it with a little egg wash. That'll make it nice and shiny. I'm going to sprinkle a little additional rosemary on the top, make it look good and give it a little fancy appeal from the top. And I've got my oven set at 425. What I'm going to do is go ahead and cut it in some little wedge shapes. Now while I'm doing this, can you guys give me any other ideas of good baked goods you can think of that would be tasty with honey?
Cookies.
Breads and rolls.
How about muffins?
Some crisps.
Oh man, you guys, let's start a bakery here. You got some great ideas. Those are all good. Now what I've done is I've separated these about 1 inch apart so they'll have room to bake up in the oven. I've set my oven to 425 degrees. Now, I'm going to pop it in there. And we're going to set the timer for about 12 minutes. It might take as much as 15, but we want to be sure. Now, tell me, what's the first savory food you can think of that goes well with honey?
Honey mustard.
Ah, good. I love honey mustard too. Now this is a simple recipe, and think about it. Mustard is so bitter and sour, and honey's really sweet. Completely opposite tastes that are wonderful on their own, but when you mix them together, oh, you get a whole new taste sensation. What we do in cooking is we use contrasting flavors to bring out a whole new range of flavor sensations. Go ahead and dip some in my honey mustard over there. Now, how does that taste to you?
Kind of sweet.
Kind of tangy.
A little sour.
Yeah.
Delicious.
Ah, sounds good to me.
Definitely.
Do you smell what I've got bubbling away on the stove?
I smell rosemary.
It looks like you've added something sort of tomato. It's sort of red. What's this for?
Well, this is a really good glaze and marinade for all kinds of meats. And you're right, I have added on to the basic honey mustard idea using rosemary and tomato. I've got some really nice high quality vinegar. I've got some citrus juice, a lot of fresh herbs. And you know what? Honey is just the perfect thing to pull all those ingredients together. They're so contrasting. They come together and they really mellow out and just make a nice tasting whole. Some other sweeteners can be a little overly aggressive or maybe too kind of simple. Honey is so full and rounded, it really gives a nice new multi-dimensional taste. In fact, see the vegetables around it? I'm even going to add a little lemon juice and honey while they're baking because that will help caramelize their own natural sugars.
That looks fantastic. When do we get to eat?
Amber, we've got plenty of stuff to cook here. We've got so many honey ideas. We're going to be cooking all night.
This is great.
Okay, now we've got our nice all-American roast in the oven. We can look at using honey in global cuisines too. After all, if you think about it, honey was the original sweetener. It's been around for thousands of years, and it comes from every country in the world. We can use it especially in this sauce, for instance. It's a salad dressing. It's not cooked, so you get the full flavor of the varietal. There's so many exotic varietal honeys you can use. I could recommend one for this salad, but really what it is it's a chance for you to taste them all and choose your own. Let's go ahead and serve up this salad, Amber. I'm gonna put some chicken on the sides, and you can go ahead and sprinkle some of those crunchy noodles right on top.
Okay.
Go ahead, be my guest. There we go. All right, you guys, have a taste. What do you think?
You know, I would have never expected honey in an Asian recipe like this, but it is totally working.
Yeah? I think maybe it's time for something thirst quenching. What do you think about a nice cran raspberry smoothie sweetened with honey?
Sounds good.
I'm going to take a basic raspberry smoothie recipe and I'm going to add a few more cranberries and then a lot of honey. We're going to just keep adding the sweet and the sour until we all just jump right out of the kitchen. You know, honey works great in smoothies, but it also works good in iced tea, in hot tea, and especially in lemonade. So, you guys think you're ready to make some honey recipes of your own?
Sure, I want to try different ice creams with different varietals.
And I want to work on the most incredible barbecue sauce. And then I'll bottle it and start my own restaurant, and then I'll get my own TV show.
Hey, that must mean the scones are ready. Well, I better get the food out. You can get some shots of that, and we'll call it a wrap.
All right.
Let's go. Let's go.
Where do you think this honey came from?
Hurry, chef. Take the camera. We're almost out of tape. We got to get a last shot of me and Amber.
So what do you think, Buzz? Will we get an A or a B?
Would you buzz off while we eat?
Broccoli, I'm home!
Excuse me?
Oh, sorry. Shish kebab, I'm home. Chicken nugget! Honey. Honey.
Hi, and welcome to the show. Today we're going to find out why we need honeybees, and we're going to go somewhere you usually don't get to go. We're going to follow bees inside a beehive. But why do we care what bees do? Well, because bees make honey, and honey is the only food that people eat which is made by an insect. I mean, they don't have a restaurant.
Hi there, hi and welcome to Honey's Outdoor Cafe. Today on the menu we got the honey. Ho! Oh, we also have the honey surprise. If there's anything in it other than honey, hey, there's a surprise! Oh.
Here's a question for you. How much honey can a honey factory make without a bee's help? The answer is, there's no such thing as a honey factory. Honey can only be made by bees. All those jars of honey, on all those grocery shelves, in all those grocery stores, those are all made by bees. But bees do more than just make honey. They also help your garden, farms, and wildlife. So what do you think would happen to these things if bees disappeared? Well, we definitely have a lot less of them, because bees not only make honey, they help pollinate plants, fruits, and vegetables. That's a bee going back to the hive. Let's follow it and see what a bee's life is really like. Can you guess how much honey one worker bee makes in her entire life? In a worker bee's whole life, she will make only 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey. Kind of makes you feel guilty, doesn't it? Nah. There are 3 types of bees that live in any hive. There is the queen bee, whose full-time job it is to lay the eggs. The other bees are very protective of her. There are the male bees, called the drones, whose only job it is to mate with the queen. And last, but definitely not least, are the worker bees. These bees are all female bees, and they make up 99% of the hive, and they do everything else that needs to be done. They take care of the nursery, build wax cells, clean the hive, gather pollen, gather nectar from flowers to make honey, and they protect the beehive from intruders. With all that a worker bee has to do, can you guess what a worker bee's average lifespan is? For worker bees born at the beginning of the summer, the average lifespan is about 45 days. The reason the bees work so hard because the most important thing to the hive is making enough honey for food so they can survive the winter. Commercial beekeepers try to make this easy on the bees by creating structures that are perfect for making and storing honey, like this frame and this beehive. That way, the bees save time building a hive, and they're able to create so much extra honey that we can take some. So, not only do we need honeybees, we need beekeepers.
Hi, my name is Gene. I'm a commercial beekeeper from Los Banos, California. I own and operate nearly 2,000 colonies of honeybees, and each colony contains nearly 30,000 bees. I've been a beekeeper for over 20 years, and one of the most important things that you need to learn how to do as a beekeeper is to keep the bees gentle. Honeybees are very gentle unless they feel threatened. In order to work bees successfully, beekeepers use a smoker, and the smoker helps us to keep the bees in a manageable condition while we're working them. In order to make honey, the bees need to first gather nectar from a flower. They do this by inserting their tongue structure, which is really like a drinking straw, and they will suck up the nectar from a flower and they will store it in their little storage tank that they have in their bodies. They will transport the nectar back to the colony, where the nectar is then deposited into a honeycomb cell. The color and the flavor of the honey that the bees produce is determined by the flowers that they're working. Some honeys, such as sage and orange blossom, are very light and mild. Other honeys that the bees would make, like buckwheat, Eucalyptus that we make here in California, avocado honey that we make here in California is very dark and somewhat stronger. And again, it's all a product of the particular flower that the bees are working. When the bees bring the nectar back to the colony, it is first put into frames such as these, and when it is thickened up by the fanning action of the bees' wings, it is then capped by wax that's produced by the bees. Once we get frames and frames of honey such as this that fill many boxes, then it's time to bring it back to the warehouse and take the honey out. The first job that needs to be done is to take off the wax cappings that the bees have placed on the honeycomb cells. This is done by a machine we call the uncapper. The uncapper automatically removes the caps from the cells. After the uncapping machine has done its job, then the frames are placed into the extractor, which is a large centrifuge, which is like a big spinner that will spin the honey out of the frames. After the honey is extracted from the frames, we pump it into a large holding tank where we either fill 55-gallon drums or jars, such as this, and it's ready for you to eat.
Gene's family has been keeping bees for years. So can you guess what year the first man-made beehive was in use? When was the first man-made beehive in use? The first record of a man-made beehive showed up in Egyptian paintings in approximately 2500 BC. 4,500 years ago, the Egyptians had beehives. Tut, tut, tut. Well, unfortunately for the Egyptians, they didn't have suits like bees, and even though bees only sting when they're threatened, it's always good to be safe. That's why I'm wearing this suit. I'm not scared or nothing. I'm not. Well, anyway, let's go deep inside the beehive. Quiet, we're going into the nursery. Oh, you woke 'em up. After a queen bee deposits an egg into a wax cell, they change into a larva and are fed by nurse bees. They are fed a combination of nectar and pollen called bee bread. Soon they metamorphosize into a pupa, and soon after that, a new baby bee is born. And you know what the first thing is these baby bees do when they emerge? They clean up their room, which of course is their wax cell. Then they start feeding the larva. They're only 2 days old and they already have a full-time job as a babysitter. Unfortunately, the queen bee's kind of short on cash, so their pay comes in honey. They don't seem to mind. In fact, there are some people who get paid in honey. You know, we've already met a commercial beekeeper. Let's meet somebody who does it just for fun.
Hi, my name is Lisa. I'm from Beaumont, Colorado, and some people might sail or fish for a hobby, but I keep bees. I got started in beekeeping about 4 years ago, and the reason I did is to help the pollination in my garden. I have fruit trees and a vegetable garden and lots of flowers, and the bees really help that a lot. The one thing I've learned about bees is really they don't bother you if you don't bother them. As long as you're calm around them, everything's just fine. You just have to be careful not to disturb their home or get too close to the hive. In the spring, I go in and check and just make sure the hives are in good shape, that they have lots of food and the queen's healthy. And then as the summer progresses and all the nectar's coming in, we just make sure that they have plenty of room to bring all that nectar in and start processing it into honey. And then in the fall is the fun part for us because we get to harvest the honey and we make sure that the bees are in good shape to start going into the winter. Well, the greatest fringe benefit of having bees is all that wonderful honey in the fall. Everyone loves to get honey. I love it. And it's also just nice to have them during the summer as a sort of a gardening companion, working in the garden with them.
As a worker bee grows, her new job is the most important one, finding flowers with a sweet liquid called nectar and bringing it back to the hive to turn into honey. When a bee lands on a flower, she thrusts her head deep into the flower and uses her proboscis to suck out the sweet nectar. The proboscis has 3 parts that come together to form a straw-like tube. Because flowers have pollen all over them and bees have little hairy bodies and don't own electric shavers, they get covered with it. This isn't an accident. Bees make sure they have plenty of pollen to take back to the hive by storing some in their back legs called pollen baskets. She will fly from flower to flower doing the same thing until she's loaded like a cargo helicopter. She then flies back to the hive, drops off the nectar and the pollen, and goes back out for another run. Take a guess. How many flowers need to be visited by the beehive to create just 1 pound of honey? Bees have to visit approximately 2 million flowers to create just 1 pound of honey. Kinda makes you feel guilty, doesn't it? Nah. Oh, you're probably wondering how the bees found those 2 million flowers that made this jar of honey. You're not gonna believe this. It may look like bees are flying erratically through the sky in a search for flowers, but they're not. They've been told exactly where to go by other bees. Many beekeepers had noticed bees acting strangely when they returned to the hive, but it wasn't until the 1920s that an Austrian professor figured it out. It's called the bee dance. The first dance is called the round dance. If flowers are close to the hive, a bee will walk in a circle on a frame just inside the hive, then it will stop and walk in a circle in the other direction until other bees join her and rub up against her, getting the scent of the nectar they're looking for. When the bees leave the hive, they will fly in a circle around the beehive until finding the flowers. The next dance is called the waggle dance. This is done when the nectar is found farther away from the hive. If the flowers are found in the direction of the sun, the bee will waggle straight up and down. If the nectar is to the right of the sun, she will waggle to the right. And if the flowers are to the left of the sun, she will waggle to the left. So even though bees can't talk, they can communicate in many different ways. Although I don't recommend doing this in public because nobody knows what you're doing.
Where did you say that clover was?
Oh, that'd be that one. What fraction of the human diet is benefited by insect pollination? 1/100th, 1/10th, 1/3, or all of it? The answer? Every third bite of food you eat is benefited by insect pollination. So the answer is 1/3. Why? Because not only do bees make honey, but they pollinate almond blossoms to give us more almonds. Not to mention apples, blueberries, cherries, cranberries, plums, squash, watermelon, zucchini, and many crops like alfalfa that help to feed farm animals. That's why every third bite of food you eat is benefited by insect pollination. So what makes up the other 2 bites of my diet? Powdered sugar donuts. So let's see how pollination really works. For a flower to create a seed, it needs the pollen from a different flower. Since flowers can't move around on their own, except in some scary dreams I've had, the only way to get that pollen is to hope that the wind blows hard or a bee or another insect covered in pollen lands on it looking for nectar or pollen. So a bee will fly over to this flower. Nope, sorry. And then we'll get all covered up in pollen and then fly over to this flower. But what happens when an area is short on bees? Well, that's where this guy comes in.
Hi, my name is Bob. I'm a migratory beekeeper. I run approximately 5,000 hives, with each hive having approximately 40,000 bees in it. Many crops need bees. I move my bees wherever they're needed. For pollination purposes in California, we move the bees to almonds and melons. After pollinating crops in California, we load the bees and move them to North Dakota for honey production. We produce honey off of clover and alfalfa.
How much surplus honey do bees make in an average hive? Here's a hint. It's somewhere between 1 teaspoon and 100 pounds. And here's the answer. Bees make approximately 80 pounds of surplus honey in an average hive. So let's figure this out. If on average bees make 80 pounds of surplus honey, and it takes 2 million flowers to make just 1 pound of honey, and there's 30,000 bees per colony, each one making in their lifetime 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey, then okay, they live 45 days long, so okay, you've got 30,000 bees, and they're making, okay, 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey in their lifetime, and there's 200,000 beekeepers, and I don't even have a teaspoon, and Houston, I have a problem. Okay, there's 80 pounds per surplus honey, and okay, what was it? Brain hurting. Not just people and bees like honey. Wasps, hornets, and other insects love it too, and they will try to steal it. Unfortunately for them, they can't get past the guard bee. This line of defense protects against anything that tries to enter, even bees from other hives. Bees communicate with pheromones, and each bee has the scent of the hive. The guard bees smell anything that tries to come into the hive with their antenna, and if something doesn't smell right, there'll be trouble. Big trouble. Now, guard bees, or honeybees for that matter, won't attack or sting you unless they feel threatened. So when you hear that buzzing around your head, they're not mad at you, they're not going to sting you, they're just flapping their wings. Now, take a guess. How many times per minute are honeybees flapping their wings? The answer, bees flap their wings more than 11,000 times per minute. Wait a minute, that's 183 times per second. Wow. Okay, let's try a little experiment. I'll time 1 second. You at home count to 183. Ready, and go. Time. Did you do it? No? Okay, let's try it again. Ready, and go. Time. How far did you get? Ready? Let's one more time. Ready, and go. Time. Those wings come in handy because one job a worker bee has in its lifetime is to cool the hive. They flap their wings at the entrance to the hive and blow cool air in the front door. That's better than my house. Actually, another thing about a bee's house is that you can eat it, or at least part of it. Comb honey is the ready-to-eat honey in the beeswax comb. Also, people use beeswax and other part of the beehive to make a ton of different products. There's enough different things that bees and honey can do. You could have a full-time cable network. Gee, I wonder what that would be like. I wonder. It's the Honey Network! 24 hours a day of bees and honey, honey, honey! And now, a word from our sponsor. What's that? Can't get enough honey products? Well, come on down to Honest Buzz's Honey Barn of Honey. We have so much honey, it's in our name twice. And we have the best deals in town. We have soaps made of honey. We have cough syrups made of honey. We have barbecue sauce made of honey. We have salad dressing made of honey. We have honey made of honey. Who put that there? We have cereals made of honey. And we have stuffed bears made of honey. We also have these products. We have mustard made of honey. We have yogurt made of honey. We even have bath gel made of honey. I don't even know what that is, but it's made of honey. And if we don't have the best deals in town, you can have my store.
If you just tuned in today to Sticky Buns, we're making a fantastic recipe. It's just delicious. Here's how we make it. First, we take a banana and we shove a stick into it. We just do it just like this. We just slowly push it up. There we go. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pour this honey bear with honey all over our banana. Oh, it's coming out so quickly there. And remember to be very careful when you're working with honey, as it can be very sticky. So what we're going to do now is spread the honey all over our banana with a knife. And of course, now had we used lighter honey, we'd have a milder, genteel flavor. A darker honey would give us a more robust, bolder flavor. Again, be careful when working with honey. It can be very sticky. Now what we're going to do now, the big closer here, is we're going to put the banana in almonds. Of course, almonds pollinated by bees. So we just roll it right in the almonds like so. Just smash those almonds on there. Be aggressive. Be aggressive. They will stick very nicely. And when you're done, you have this lovely dessert. Oh, it looks, doesn't it just look marvelous? And of course, it's called a banana soup. It's a banana rolled in honey and almonds. Bon appetit!
Let's continue with our experiment on the science of honey. Today we will learn how to turn crystallized honey into smooth honey. In many countries, finely crystallized honey is called whipped honey and is spread right onto food, such as this one. Sometimes people throw out an entire jar of honey just because it is a little bit crystallized or is a little cloudy, such as this one. Oh dear, not acceptable at all. When you go home today, if you have a crystallized jar of honey, what you need to do is remove the lid. Remove the lid, place it on the table, and put the honey in a container of very warm water. Not boiling, very warm water. And slowly but surely, the crystals will dissolve, and when you remove the honey from the container, the honey will be smooth. The science of honey. Amazing!
Maybe a honey network isn't such a great idea. But eating honey is. It gives you quick energy, which is why a lot of long-distance runners use it. It has vitamins that we need and antioxidants which help fight certain diseases. But remember, babies under 1 year old are not allowed to have honey. So there's one thing you don't have to share with your baby sister. Well, I hope you learned a lot today. I learned that we need pollination because we definitely need food, and we definitely need honeybees. In fact, you may want to check out the Honey Board website at www.honey.com. And if you can't check out the website, you may want to give them a buzz. Or I guess you could make a beeline over to their office. But whatever you do, you don't want to bug them. And well, thanks for watching. I'll be seeing you. See you later, pollinator. What?